Welcome to The Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guests for today's podcast. I am humbled and honored to be in the virtual studio with Vincent Valeri. Vincent and I were introduced through a friend of the podcast and past guest, Kristen Heaney, and I'm super excited to have him on today.
Thank you.
Vincent, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Justin. Nice to be here. I love what you're doing with this, the currency of grief. What did you call yourself there? Your grief.
The grief financial officer.
Love it. It's needed. It's like you said on the onset, it's a lot of unspoken conversations.
Definitely.
Benefit families.
And I know you have your own experience and you play in this space. Mm-hmm. So what made you want to come on the podcast and share your story?
Besides, we'll pick on our friend Kristen. Besides Kristen speaking so glowingly about you, I think it's important to share our story. I think we, in a bit of a long form context too. As you mentioned, I do this work for a living. I work with family enterprises for transition and succession planning conversations, and grief and mortality and death is reality. And if my story, the good and the bad, can help anybody listening lean into a tougher conversation or make a decision earlier with respect to their own life or the loved ones, then that's why I wanted to come on and share with you.
Definitely. I really appreciate that. And I know our listeners appreciate that too, because main mission of this podcast, a main mission is to ensure that, no other person feels alone. And we just don't talk about it that much. And when you're going through it, you do feel alone.
You do, especially, I know we'll get into this on this talk, especially if you're the one responsible for helping ensure the estate also transitions well. It can be really, really a bumpy road, especially for folks that aren't inclined in this space.
Right.
It can be a real daunting task, very emotional as well too.
For sure, very emotional. Well, speaking of emotional and speaking of your story, here on The Currency of Grief, we don't hold back. We dive right in. Good. So literally in the first couple of minutes of this podcast. Vincent, tell us about your grief story.
Yeah. I mean, it changes all the time, but my story is about my dad, who also have his name. So he was born in Italy in 1944 in a small village in Abruzzo, which is central. They call it South Italy. I would argue it's Central Italy, but for another day. Like a lot of immigrants that came over to the U.S., I'm in Canada. Came over with very little and was able to build a life. Obviously, meeting my mom, having my sister and I have a twin sister, and then also built this a technology company that afforded our family a lot of the nice things in life. Also, challenges too that comes with managing assets together. So Dad was a big outgoing character. I share all aspects of the story because it's part of our story. But as a young kid, he was around, but not around as much, maybe mentally, because of the business. And we see this in our work where these entrepreneurs or family business leaders are so focused on the operations, something has to give. So my story is no different than that. As I got a bit older, into my early teens, I started working for Dad in his factory. So I got to spend a lot of time with him and see him in a different light. It's one thing to know Dad And it's another thing to know Vince, the man, the businessman, and just how he was socially with people. Really outgoing guy. I worked for him for a long time, and he ended up having a liquidity event at the tender age of 65, which was great. It brought us really close together after he sold this company. So 65, he passed at 79. So we had a really, really close 14, 15 years together after the sale of his company. Unfortunately, we were able to withstand the COVID years, as some people didn't. And then in late 2022, November 2022 to be exact, he came back from one of his trips south and wasn't feeling well. And you could actually see in his demeanor and his face that something was wrong.
Wow.
Fast forward quickly, that December of 2022, he was diagnosed with stage 4 bile duct cancer, which is a very rare, as you learn these things, like what's duct cancer, and then you become an aficionado in that space. December 4th, 2022, he was diagnosed with stage 4 bile duct cancer. Unfortunately, had metastasized different parts of the body, so that it was, the news is obviously heavy. Being his son, and he was not only being my dad, we were really close friends and buddies, and probably got into more mischief than we would have liked going through life together. But I was also the executor of his estate. So the news for me, December 4th, 2022, was very emotional because, dad's not well, and because I'm the executor, and I knew the lack of planning that was done to date, just given dad's character. And I, didn't expect him to pass so quickly. I knew what was coming ahead of me in terms of legal stuff and money and taxes. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, like the oncologist said, I remember, it was December 4th, he was diagnosed. December 7th, I sat down with the oncologist, my sister and I said, brass tacks here, like, what are we dealing with? And she said, your dad has 6 to 8 weeks to live.
Jeez.
Which was like pretty immediate. Looking back, I'm grateful for the time, even though seeing him decline the way we did, you don't wish that upon your worst enemy, to see their loved one deteriorate as my dad did in those 6 to 8 weeks. And to her timeline, he passed away relatively peacefully, I think. I mean, obviously in a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. He passed away February 7th, 2023, with a bunch of us around him, loved ones, my family, and some friends, some very close friends. Mm-hmm. It was really trippy to see your dad take his last breath, and then be left in a room with the closest people to him and to you, right, and to me, and just have that void, right? It was real. I can smile and maybe laugh a bit now because it's been some time, but what an experience to help my dad transition. And a lot of credit for that grace goes to his wife at the time and to my sister, who really kept him as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. Vincent, thank you so much for sharing those details. Yeah. What was your dad's name?
Vincenzo.
Vincenzo.
I'm laughing, Justin, because his name was one of the issues in trying to close out the estate. Like, again, these immigrants come over, and his passport says one thing, he tells the driver's license guy the other thing. So like on different documents, he had different names.
Oh my gosh!
So one he'd be Vincent, one he'd be Vince, one he'd be Vincenzo. Again, and I think it was my dad's way of him thinking he was getting one over the system. Like, they won't find me if I. And I said to him, but your social insurance number is the same on all 3 documents.
Right. Of course.
It was a joke he and I used to play with all the time.
Yeah.
It was something that he used to do often. He would change his first name on documents. Yeah.
And so, I want to learn more. So I think you were the first international guest. So talk about the culture and the difference between the Italy culture, the Canada culture, and maybe even the culture in the US, if there's any difference between the US and Canada, and how, money was talked at home, how, you know, the different cultures handle these types of situations.
Yeah, I'm smiling because even though I'm born in Canada, I'm a very proud Canadian. I'm very much Italian.
Yeah.
Dad never lost his roots. I think he governed his life as an Italian living in Canada, being a Canadian citizen. I mean, Italian culture in general, you don't really question mom and dad.
Mm,
That's one thing, right? So your parents, I think in a lot of families, but in Italian culture, mom for sure is a major figurehead, and dad is ultimately somebody you never challenge. Um, and that unfortunately played a role in the headache that I had to do to close out his estate after. And I think in Canada, Canadians, a little bit, we're a little bit quieter than our American friends. Um, I still think, it's part of the work I do today in helping families bring forward some of these money conversations. It just wasn't spoken about
mhm.
in on all fronts, and as we got older together, Dad and I've been doing this work for a long time. I used to also be a wealth advisor from one of our banks. So I get it. I know what happens on
Yeah.
the day somebody passes with respect to a deemed disposition and taxes. And so as much as I knew, so to the culture question, Justin, as much as I tried, even begged for him to pay more attention to his estate plan, clean up some things. He had companies and intercompany loans and different things going on. Unfortunately, Dad was just was a bit of a carefree kind of guy, and then the culture part kicks in because you push, you push, you push, but then there's this kind of invisible wall of respect that you don't push too hard.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and Dad also grew up very challenged, right? So he was born during World War II, January of 1944. Just the war ended, I think, November of 45. My time
Yeah.
in and around that time.
Sounds about right.
He was an orphan, so he never met his dad.
Wow.
His mom passed away when he was young, 12 or 13 years old. So he really became a village kid. So there
Mhm.
was a lot of that. Then he came to Canada and did well for himself financially, built a family, a whole network of friends.
Yeah.
We just a lot of that emotional stuff with Dad. We just didn't talk about,
Mhm.
especially his upbringing, and those were like no go zones for him.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, a lot of those. It's part of why I wanted to come on your podcast too. Those heartfelt conversations were unfortunately missed before he passed.
Yeah.
And then we got the diagnosis, 6 to 8 weeks, and you go, there's 100 things we have to do before you pass. Some of it being legal and or emotional. You
Yeah.
almost have to pick and choose, and I had to pick and choose. What are you going to prioritize for the next 6 to 8 weeks? In terms of what are we going to talk about? Uh,
Mhm.
so that's part of the story.
Are we just going to have fun? Are we going to focus on the logistics? Are we going to have deep conversations about these topics that we haven't dove into in the past, or are we going to just enjoy ourselves? Or there's so many different avenues I feel like you can go down when time is crunched and limited.
All of that. And if you've ever had the experience of uh, living, working, being with someone that has that type of terminal illness,
Mm-hmm.
they deteriorate so quickly. And that was the big shock for me. Like, you learn a lot about the human body going through this, and
Yeah.
and frankly how fragile we all are. Um, I would see Dad on a Monday. Uh, I would say he was okay December, the first couple of weeks. By Christmas time of December 2022, it was so advanced, and then the mental deterioration. It became really really bad, really really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, right? Like, again, as the executor and knowing the system and like the tax system that we're in, I know the things that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, the person who could address them, my dad, didn't have the mental capacity to address them, right? So then it's like, now you're making assumptions of, well, this is what he told me. This is what I think he would like. And yeah, to your point, like,
Yeah.
it's tough. And then the pain,
Mm-hmm.
the actual physical pain of your body breaking down set in for him. He was in pain, like
Yeah.
extreme pain. So then it just became like a do what you can, and to your comment earlier, try to enjoy the moments that you have him, and then whatever comes after in terms of the estate piece, I have to deal with it as best as I can, and I hopefully I did.
Yeah. Let's let's dive into the pain and the grief of loss, because and how it not only affected your dad but also you.
Mhm.
And then let's talk about how you did as an executor and recap that, which I'm sure you did an amazing job. Out of curiosity, was your biological mom part of the picture?
No, no. Mom and dad divorced when I was quite young, 13, 14.
Okay.
So that added some dynamics to the situation for sure. So
Right.
mom was there, but in grieving in her own way, for sure, but not part of any of the estate conversations or anything like that.
Okay. Well, who gave you support with the emotional side? What
Yeah.
did you do to process what felt right for you, and how did you find an outlet emotionally that brought you, you know, solace or closer to your dad?
Yeah. I mean, my wife Angela for sure was there, 24 hours a day with me. And unfortunately, at that time for her, she had lost a good friend as well, in a unexpected passing. So that was January of 2022. Sorry, January 2023, and my dad passed a month later. So we were in the shit, Justin.
Yeah, we gone through it.
We were in deep January, February of 2023. My wife and I, my wife Angela and I. So definitely for sure, Angela was my. So we were supporting each other, going through this really challenging emotional time for each other. But I think in particular, the one who I really leaned on was my uncle Tony, who's actually my mom's brother. Long backstory. My my dad and my uncle still were maintained. They were very close even after my parents separated. 35 years ago. Um, he was a big rock for me. Smart man, businessman, very calm individual, and
Yeah.
I leaned on him heavily. Um, I would say hourly, because I mean you've been through this too, right? So like so much information's coming at you, and how do you process it? So I would say definitely my wife and my uncle Tony were the two big people just to help. Tony in particular on the medical side,
Mm,
on the estate side, just to take a deep breath.
yeah.
And I mean, this is I smile. I do a lot of coaching for rising gen, as we call it in our families.
Yeah.
And this is adulting, right? You never want to grow up. And now here I am at 47 now, so 42, 43 when dad passed, and you're going, man, I'm making decisions I never thought I'd have to make.
Yeah.
Um, but those two, and I mean, you can't do it alone. Dad had all these very simple sayings, and one of them was always, like, you don't do life alone. And even in the times of grief and both, again, like I mentioned, my wife and I were really in a dark place. January and February of 2023, decisions still need to get made.
Yeah.
The world still turns. And I think for me, that was the big, like, holy shit, I might be going through something that's the worst thing possible, but person over here has their own things going on. And I think that, in a weird way, that also helped keep things in perspective. This is the cycle of life.
Mhm.
And looking back, it was quite the honor, even though it was hard to be the person tasked with all of these decisions on behalf of arguably the closest person I've ever been to in my life was my dad, right? So
Right. Yeah. Like, with the overwhelming amount of tasks and the limited amount of time,
yeah,
going back to that 6 to 8 week diagnosis,
yeah.
how did you, even, during that and after, how did you make decisions? Was it, anytime information was given to you by a doctor or by an attorney, you would pick up the phone and call Tony or call Angela or call your sister and vet them? Did you trust your gut? Like, how did you make decisions, especially given all that you and Angela were going through during that dark
Yeah.
time?
I definitely did. I leaned on the vetting. Like I would definitely, so information would come to me. I would, this is what I think I should do. Being an executor is a lonely, lonely world, man. Like,
Mm,
I mean, like you
yeah,
literally have legal responsibility for an estate, right? So yeah, information would come to me. Again, I'm blessed that I've been doing this work, working with complex families for a long time. So I do have a network of experts I can pull on, which was huge.
yeah,
Um, on the medical side, that was more my sister, right? So I think anything medically related, my sister was front and center in all those conversations, and frankly, probably leading more of the health centric stuff. I was more on the estate and getting shit done. Like if she would call me and say, "We need a like an elevator chair, a lift to be installed in the house because Dad can't walk up the stairs," and I would be the one to go and find that lift and get
yeah,
it installed in 24 hours. So we played that role. On the estate side, a little bit different. Me being the executor as well as a beneficiary of his estate, my sister being a beneficiary only, and not having the language or just the experience of that was a bit of a more challenging process because decisions need to be made quickly. At the same time, I'm trying to help honor her and educate her
yeah,
on why certain things are like the tax code and estate taxes.
yeah.
And we have some registered investment accounts in Canada that when you die, it's deemed as income, and all these things that are like,
Mm,
thankfully, I know because I did this work. For someone that's never been through it, it's a lot to process.
yeah.
Um, and we just divided and conquered as best as we could, just to try to get through a day, and then try to sleep 4 or 5 hours, and the next day you
Well,
provide again.
on that same point, um, during this time of December, January, February, and then the months preceding afterwards that you were the executor of your dad's estate, did you continue? What was your job, or and if it's the same job or not? And did you continue working?
Good question. So my work was the same at the time. I was working with another company. I took 3 months off. I mean, I was working, but I think everybody understood where I was at. Um, and I'm in a position that I could afford that time too. And honestly, if I couldn't afford it financially, I probably would have done it anyway.
Yeah, you needed it.
When we got the diagnosis, the time frame, and that there was literally no alternative for him, because right away you go into like, okay, well, what are our options? Can we go to the US? Can we find a specialist that specializes in bile duct cancer? Can
Hmm.
we try to extend Dad by a year, his life? When all those options were off the table, then it was, so for the next 8 weeks, I'm not leaving this man's side.
Yeah.
And so, that was, and I'm grateful I was able to do that. Um, Grateful that clients and people I work with understood that,
Hmm.
and you're able to again, I'm very lucky with with Angela, and her
Yeah.
family as well. Like I have to even give a shout out to my in-laws,
Hmm.
um, helping me with our kids and being there for me. I'm very close to my in-laws,
Really nice.
very close with my kids. So it was just a matter of, and my mom too, like all these different people that you could talk to just help get through it.
Hmm.
I mean, and as you know, then the executor's got to go got to go sign a bunch of papers, right? And
Right.
you hope that you're doing the right things based on the information that you have.
Right. Bank to bank, call to call.
Bank account to bank
Yeah,
account.
100%. Like, I'm just thinking like the AT&T and the phone bill is just frustrating. Um,
Unbelievable.
yeah. Before we dive into all of those, financial logistics, I'm just envisioning this room that you're in with your dad next to your dad and your sister and everybody who's close to you and your family as he's taking his last breath. And then you mentioned the void afterwards.
Mhm.
When did it settle in that he wasn't physically there anymore?
I would say I mean immediately the moment he passed, but I would say even before that, I think he was so sick, Justin.
Mm.
It's like he again diagnosed December 4th. Probably 2 weeks after that, he was gone. He
Yeah.
just wasn't the same guy. He couldn't hold a conversation. There's the pain, and then there's this reality that he knows it's coming. So every conversation was uber emotional, and it's just. But the void, I mean, all along the way, I think the void was present. Dad and I again were very close business partners, friends.
Yeah.
We did a lot of projects together. He and I, without exaggerating, would talk 4 or 5 times a day. Like my day would start and finish with conversing with my dad in some form.
Right.
And I really, really were really close as people, and I'm really grateful I got to know like Vince, not just dad, like the guy, right?
Yeah.
I felt the void right away, man. And he was such a big, in all of it, but for me, such a big figure, immigrant, entrepreneur. Just the things that he accomplished in a short period of time was almost, as a kid, it was daunting. Like, holy cow, how am I going to fill these shoes? And then as you get older, you just really appreciate and becoming a dad. Then you realize, I don't know what I'm doing. It means he didn't know what he was doing. Back to your question, the void was immediate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just it hits you. In our case, he died at home. We set up palliative care at home, and shout out to his wife Marlon, who was a retired doctor. So she was able to manage him at the house and administer medicine. We had the medical bed there. So he passed, and then you make the call, and they come and remove the body. They come and remove your dad, right? And
Yeah.
I think
That's weird.
it's intense.
Yeah.
So you're processing. Dad passes away. It was probably early afternoon. You make the call because we have nurses on site. Nurse makes a call. They come. They take him away.
Mm-hmm.
They take him away, and then now there's this empty bed that he was lying in for 5-6 weeks, and there's still the 10 or 11 people that were there. You're like, holy shit! Like, he's gone.
Yeah.
It was pretty intense, man. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It was a very intense afternoon. Grateful that I was there with my sister, obviously, and my uncle and my cousins. Some of my one first cousin was there, very close to my dad as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to process that, right? It's yeah.
I think a lot of people in our society, when they get a diagnosis or when they finally say goodbye to somebody, a lot of people feel like they have to do something. They need to do something to make things right, or do something nice for somebody else, or just try to figure out a way to make like stay active, to keep their mind rolling instead of process those emotions immediately. And so I want to know, A, if that was present in that space, and B, what were those immediate action steps that financially and logistically that you needed to take after the diagnosis, and then after that intense afternoon, what was needed to be done immediately? And from your experience, what did you feel like, hey, we don't actually need to have this conversation or tackle this task right now?
Yeah. If I get off track, please remind me.
Yeah.
The immediate, when he got diagnosed, immediately, because I knew some of the planning hadn't been done. For example, the house him and his wife were living in was only in his name.
Mm-hmm.
They were recently married a couple of years ago. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. So that was a big, like, and he's like, I remember him begging me, please, clean this up for me. Right.
Yeah.
That was the first thing we did, was to get their matrimonial home with her on there, so that when he passes in Canada, like the US, we go through probate. So that was the first step. The next step, financially, was some of his registered accounts to make sure they had the right beneficiaries on there, or else they go into probate. Bank accounts, making sure there's two names on there as much as you can. And it was muddling through. And then he also had some holding companies that were, from years prior that, so for me, it was lawyer for the house. And then immediately after diagnosis, I sat down with his accountant, who's been the family accountant for years and years and years, also a good friend of our family, just to start to understand what's coming down the pipe here with respect to taxes. And, again, he had a number of holding companies that were crossing fiscals, and it was like a whole conundrum. But then honestly too, Justin, like I talked about earlier, we did as much as we could to try to mitigate some of this blowback from the estate. But then it got to the point where I just made a decision. Like, well, look, whatever happens after, whatever comes after comes. Yeah. And I'll deal with it then. My goal was to make Dad as comfortable, and to really pass with grace. And the money part of it, a lot of that I kept quiet until after, because there's not a lot of things you can do. Like for the bank, for example, I'll say I need to put Justin on this bank account. Well, your dad needs to come into the branch and sign. You're like, well, he can't.
Yeah.
Well, we can't put his name. We can't put their name on it. You're like,
right.
So there's certain things that you can and can't do, right? And you just honestly have to accept it, and move on, and try to mitigate risk where you can.
Right. And there also could be some legality around making changes in the last 8 weeks of somebody's life as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the lawyer gets the call, make sure we have the most up-to-date will.
Right.
This is, you get as best as we could confirm that with Dad. Like, hey, you signed this 2 years ago or whatever the time was. Like, is this still what you want?
Yeah.
And yeah, like, it's, again, he didn't think, we all think not that we live forever, but that we have more time than we do sometimes. My dad, unfortunately, was no exception to that rule or that thought. And it complicated things a little bit because of the blended family, right? So that you try to do things as best as you can to appease some of his wishes. But to your point, legally, lawyers won't touch that. They're like, you want me to do what with the will? It's not happening, right? So you learn these things and go through it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the second marriage. You mentioned that the fact that your dad had sold a business but had different business entities, international entities, accounts, stuff like that. So talk a little bit about the specific complexity, and are there anything outside of the house that really stands out as something that people should watch out for in complex situations?
The crossing of fiscals. So my dad passed February 2023. So tax season is April. We're April 30th. You guys are April 15th. So the same, right?
Yeah.
Well, unbeknownst to me. So now you have to file taxes. He had to file taxes for 2022, personal. Then he has to file taxes for 2023, the year of death.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has fiscals. I don't remember what the months were exactly, but the fiscals was like, May 1st to June 30th.
Right.
So then that crossed twice.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
I had to do four filings.
Yeah. And how long did his estate last, like in probate, and how long was it open?
So I got we call it a clearance certificate up here.
Uh-huh.
It was it was 26 months from the moment he died till I got the clearance certificate from our friends at CRA, your friends at the IRS, saying this estate is free and clear.
Yeah.
Now you can distribute funds to the beneficiaries. So it took 2 years. And I
2 years and change.
Sorry, say again.
2 years and change. 2 years and 2 months
of dealing with the same, and like you have the same conversation 50 times. And I mean, again, like, I don't. I mean, it's been a few years. I don't even know if it sounds more, but I tell clients, I say, like, my dad passing gave me the biggest gift, like the gift of urgency. Like if you leave these things, if these conversations and certain documents are left, like without having that conversation or without checking off that bank account, it will come back to bite you tenfold, right?
Yeah.
And then, being the sole executor, right? Like I would imagine it's the same thing in the US. If there's a shortfall in the estate to the government, the executor is legally liable for the estate short. So now you're like, woof, right? Thankfully, there was enough liquidity there to make things happen, and et cetera. But it's a lot of work. I think people go, oh, I'm so-and-so's executor. And yeah, it's an honor for sure. That means you're the most trusted person in that person's life. And it's a lot of work to be an executor.
Yeah. What you mentioned, having these conversations and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and that gift of urgency. So was there anything that you wish you knew or wish you talked about with your dad around money, life, or legacy, or any questions you didn't get to ask?
Money, not really, because I was really like, I think the problem, I mean, it's a bit of a joke that I tell myself. I knew too much. I knew Dad and I were on the estate side and financial side. I knew exactly what was going on. I was his confidant. My sister, not so much. So I wished he would have shared more with my sister about why he did certain things, and with his estate and money that I had to be the messenger of after. I wish, it's a big wish, he would have done more planning earlier. I mean, I'm not, he was 79 when he passed. I'm sure no one likes to talk about their death.
Right.
Really, it's really about the people that are left behind and the mess that you leave. I wish, I've had this conversation on another show before. One of the things we never spoke about, Dad and I, was his upbringing. We just never talked about his life growing up in Italy. It was very, obviously, very emotional for him. Probably not a good time either. That it bothers me is the wrong word. It's a missed opportunity, because I see my boys, and I am uber present. Probably because Dad wasn't around as much as I wanted when I was a little boy, because he was at the company, at the factory. But like the kids, I want my boys to know everything about everything. Like, Ange and I have these different activities. We write stuff down to share with them, and I miss that.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I wish we spent more time talking about it. We did, we did after he started the company, we had a lot of business life lessons. Here's what I learned. Here's the mistakes I made about business.
Right.
But on the just him growing up as an orphan, just never, we just never talked about that stuff. And that's something that it's like, I remember I always wanted to make a point of it and we just never got to it. And then he passed.
Yeah. Talking about the business, it's from from listening to your story, you grew up watching him pour his heart and soul into this business and create security for your family. And so how did it feel when he sold the business? Was it something that, I mean, even having the same name as him, did you want to, take over the business? Or how did it feel when he sold the business?
Yeah, they're going down a deep path here. This is why I do the work that I do. There was at that time, 27, 28, 29, he sold it January of 2006. So I was turning 27. At that time, there was nothing I wanted to do more in life than work with dad or frankly, take over dad's company. I was all in. I was all in on his story, all in on his adventure. He used to make circuit boards, computer chips.
Cool.
I was enamored by my dad. How did you start this? How did you get involved? Technology. That company took us all over the world, and at the forefront of technology, which was really neat. Like one of the things, remember the BlackBerry, the famous Canadian BlackBerry from back then. It was called Research in Motion, the company, now called BlackBerry. Dad's factory, his company was the company that fabricated those first circuit boards. Right. So, I remember on a flight, this was after dad passed, I was coming back from a work trip, and that movie BlackBerry was playing on the plane, and they were showing scenes from the early 90s of their fact. I remember visiting that place when I was a kid. I was overcome with emotion on this flight, and I could just imagine the person what are you crying about, right?
Next to you.
So at the time when he sold it, it made sense financially for sure. It was a good business decision for dad to get out. But for me, Justin, it screwed me up to no end. I was angry, I was confused, I was scared, right? And in my case, I built up this whole false persona of who I was. We own this company, and I'm gonna take over that job, and life's gonna be easy because we have this company that kicks off this much money, and everything's gonna be fine. Well, life has a way of throwing curveballs.
Yeah.
At the time, I was, like I said, not in a good place. And at that time, I actually met my wife, which was interesting because she met me at a low point in terms of confidence and direction. And thankfully, she saw something there and helped build me back up.
That's great. So
looking back now, at that pivotal point, I am so grateful he sold his company. Because it's allowed me to be me and create my own company and my own adventures and not following his.
Yeah.
That's my bias. And that's one of the challenges I have working with family enterprises as a coach, advisor, is my bias is follow your own path. And some parents are like, hey.
We want them to take over the business.
Junior to take over. I'm like, well, only if Junior really wants to take over.
But I think that's something that people need to talk about. And you mentioned the conversations. Hey, we should have that conversation. I'm sure you have these in your coaching. Is does Junior want to take over? 1, do you want them to take over? 2, and 3, do they have what it takes to continue the legacy?
Yeah. So yeah, at the time it was not a good scene. But then again, you look back at life, right? So life
Mhm.
has all these, life gives you signals and signs. If you pay attention to them, you'll find your path. And I was no different.
Yeah.
Um, I remember he was such a character. I think it was 2015. I got awarded something in my city here called Hamilton. It was like
Cool.
40 under 40 businessman, someone nominated me that I worked with, and it was a nice award. I was very, very grateful. So I'm there. I spoke in front of like 300 people. Right?
That's sweet.
So I go back to my table, and my dad's like old school manufacturing. Like you build something, you sell something, and he looks at me. He goes, "What do you do?" I go, "I help people have conversations about life and money." And he's like, "I don't get it, right?" It was again really made me laugh. Like here I am with an award, right? And he's like, "What is exactly that you do?" But that was him. He was just had his way. He was like blunt.
Yeah.
Didn't have a filter for for what he wanted to say and when he wanted to say it. But it made me laugh that he was there supporting me because I'm his kid. But he's like, "I don't understand this business that
Yeah.
you're in."
And interesting because thinking about I'm stuck, a generation, a person being stuck in their own ways. There's a lot of times where money isn't talked about throughout the entire family, or, in your situation, you were his closest confidant. You knew everything, but your sister, wasn't. And you were left explaining a lot of his decisions to your sister, which probably, you know, had a variety of emotions tied to that. And so what was the dynamic like with you and your sister? Dive into that a little bit more when one person's given the responsibility and, the honor of being an executor. Was there anything specific that may have upset her, or like anything specific that he did that may have upset her, or may have should have been done differently?
Yeah, no, definitely challenging. It definitely changes the dynamics of the relationship. I don't think he did any. It's not a matter of again, we see this, right? When there is a imbalance in information or understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that leads to conflict. That's essentially conflict by definition is a different perspective. So in Dad's case, you brought me back to the Italian culture. It's changed a lot, but Dad was, old school Italian, with a modernized tech money twist. I'll
Okay.
say, you know, um,
Making circuit boards.
making circuit boards, but Italian guy making circuit boards. You talk about the male being the male. He felt comfortable in sharing what you said, the responsibilities and or some of the burden of having to make these decisions around money. And he saw that I could, and I liked it. And he and I again were very similar personality. Italian culture and daughters, father and daughters, it's a much more protective. I'm the dad, you're the daughter. I'll protect you. Sheltered, you could use that word. So my sister was sheltered from a lot of those money conversations with my dad. Mm-hmm. And there's a perception, right? There's a perception of, well, this is what you think there is, or what could be. And then there's the reality piece too. Dad died at 79. Like it's like he lived a good life in terms of time. So now one person, my sister, is just learning this information today. Oh, like a RIF account in Canada gets taxed as income in your final year of death.
Mm.
Which, our tax code in Canada is we're one of the highest tax jurisdictions in the world.
Yeah.
So you can just imagine the number of zeros in taxes that some of us have to pay. And that comes right out of the estate pocket.
First. Yeah.
So there's that kind of education for all families would be beneficial. Like this is how estates get taxed. This is what happens when a bank account with money in it doesn't have a co-signer on there. It goes to probate.
Yeah.
You know, this is what happens when the family cottage is still in your dad's name and he passes. It goes through probate, right? So, so then there's like that. It's like a lockup mechanism for the government to get their money. Okay, but for beneficiaries that don't understand the time that's actually involved, like probate can take months and months and months. It can really, and then you're the person, the executor with the perceived answers. It definitely led to challenges that still linger between my sister and I today. Again, that you wish, one of my mantra is the wrong word, but one of my almost non-negotiables with my clients is we all have to talk about this, the whole family. Because in my case, transparency was high. In my sister's case, transparency was very low. Yeah, they were close, father and daughter, very, very close. You know, he named her as the head of the health. So my sister was, they call it a personal health directive, a POA. Okay. So she had that authority over his health. I had the authority over his estate, right? So it's this balancing act that you play. Right. But again, that lack of transparency from him to my sister is what led to, you know, a lot of questions and challenging conversations for sure after he passed.
Definitely. I think it's interesting. One of my last podcasts that I did, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I talked about, you know, who's got ball, who's on your team, how to build your roster with estate planning. And I say, you know, if you have the same person as POA, medical directive, executor, financial, all of that, they're going to get super overwhelmed. It's very overwhelming as it is just to be the executor, or to be the trustee. And so to, you know, at least empower your sister in your situation with a role of taking care of his, like speaking with the doctors and being his medical power of attorney. Yeah. That's super impactful. But I think you have to be intentional about what people's role are on the roster. You can't just put everybody on the field because, you know, everybody's going to line up at quarterback or wide receiver using a football analogy. Yeah. So in your now coaching, putting your coaching hat on, how do you coach families to talk about this? How do you coach families to talk about it? Do you say, hey, everybody needs to be involved, everybody needs to know everything? Does everybody need to know something? Does everybody need to know their specific role?
All of the above. And I think that it's really my starting point with families is, what experience do you want to have? Everything, right? So mom and dad have a business, whatever it is, and there is some element of wealth that they want to transition to their kids. What's that experience like? What's the movie that's being played of your family after you pass? And it's a heavy question.
Yeah.
What do you want this transition to feel like? You know, and I think if you help people, it's like a coaching thing, right? So people usually don't step into action until the pain is too much to handle. If times are good, why change? So especially in families that have wealth, where I use this saying a lot: the money can paper over the problems, so you never really get to the core of that root cause problem, like what's going on here.
Yeah.
A visioning exercise of that type of question, like what do you want this experience to be like for you and for your kids? And then then there's the positive aspect of that. So if everything works out well, what's it like? And there's all the positive words. Everyone's getting along. People remember us fondly, whatever that story is for you. The coaching conversation then becomes, what if things don't work out well? Where are people? Like, what are the questions people have? What are the conversations they're having or not having? What are their relationships like if things don't work out well? And I say to families, especially, during times of transition, you can hire the brightest legal and finance people in the country. They can transition all of your assets to the next generation in the most tax efficient manner. Would that be success? And they said, of course, that's what we want. Caveat is your kids, the siblings, they don't like each other. Is that success? And 99% of mom and dads go, oh no. A, they'll deny. They'll say, my kids will never fight. And you go, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Or the answer is always, obviously, that's not success. We've worked so hard, and this is my dad's situation too. And this is why I think, you again, just regrets. I don't, Frank Sinatra. I only have a few, right?
Yeah.
It's not a regret that I have with that. I wish my hope for him would have, with my sister in particular, that he had more of these transparency conversations. Because again, if I had the power to ask him a question today, he'd be upset for sure with how certain things played out. And ultimately, he was the one responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And I think that's what helped me. I think, and I'm jumping a little bit, but like the grief never leaves you. Like I talk to my dad every single day. Every day I'll ask him a question or think of him or what would he do? How would he approach this? But I think what helped me kind of get over and ultimately you have to continue to move on. My two boys for sure, but it was his life. He made certain decisions that he felt were the ones that worked for him. And how the cards laid after is how they laid after. And I was tasked with doing the best I could do for him.
Yeah.
And for me, right? I think it's, and that's what kind of has allowed me to close the chapter on that part of my life. I'm no longer his executor. The estate is clear, right? So I'm like
your identity anymore. Yeah. It's super interesting. It's really hard because you only are making decisions based on the information that you have. So having experienced this, like for me twice being an executor in two estates, I know the more transparency, the better. You don't even have to go through dollar amounts. Just this is the way I want things divided. This is every single piece of jewelry on a list that I want to go to which person, instead of here's a box or here's what's left. Figure it out. That's all part of your legacy. And unfortunately, if you have never been through it before, it's really hard to understand. And one of the purposes of the podcast is to help educate and say, for those who have never been an executor, hopefully have never lost somebody, let's still have these conversations because this is all part of their legacy. Do you want to comment on that before
I think that I am a big proponent of family meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what your net worth is. I think every family, and there's tons of books like Successful Families. I don't know if it was Coveney or Start with the End in Mind, and he even has a book on the 7 habits of successful families. And family meetings is it doesn't have to be this elaborate thing. It could be Sunday afternoon,
right,
on the kitchen table, just talking about the stuff that matters. And you said it on the onset, right? Like we're fools with our own mortality. Hopefully, we all live this extended, like we say, cent'anno in Italian, 100 years, right?
Yeah.
Reality is that's not the case for everybody, and I think it's helpful that families that plan together. It's a cheesy saying, but they stay together, right? Like it's. And my hope with this podcast, through our work or whatever, different books written on this topic, at least once a year, sit down with your family and talk about here's what's in place, here's what happens if, so that people have an understanding, transparency about these what if scenarios. Like corporations and businesses, we spend so much time on what if. neglect that in our personal lives. And I just think that like the biggest gift, Tom Deans is a famous author up here in Canada, wrote Every Family, well, everywhere, Every Family Business, Willing Wisdom. And he says a lot of things, but one thing that always resonates with me is like one of the greatest gifts you can give your family is the gift of calm after you
Yeah.
pass. Like, and that's my hope for the work that I do with families too, is like just helping families get back to this level of calmness so that they can be family again. In my case, it's taken time to get back around the table to be family again because we went through this real awkward. There was a death, of the figurehead, of the glue of the family, and then there was all the legalities that I had to deal with after that. It takes time to get back around the table and talk as people, right? And so
100%.
yeah, I would encourage anyone listening. It's the hard conversations that need to happen. I laugh because I tell my wife, I tell my boys, with the advent of AI, I think the biggest skill, and this is what I'm looking at from my work too, is going to be the skill of artful conversations amongst humans. Like we need to get back to talking.
Yeah.
We're getting away from it, and I think that's
Super fascinating. I have a brother who's 9.5 years younger, and we had me, him, and an extended relative of ours had, a really great conversation around business, and he's very successful. And, my brother sort of started the conversation, and then I kind of led some of the questions, and he came to me after in the car ride home, and he was like, I never was able to like do what you kind of just did with family members, like the art of, and he's really articulate. And so just thinking and knowing like the younger generation, I think you're 100% right of how to ask the hard questions, not shy away from it, meet someone face to face and have those articulate conversations.
It's funny. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but not too much older. I remember like when you're a kid, they'll say, when you're older, you'll understand. Like, what does that mean? Right? It's true.
Yeah.
Once you've experienced death, hard, and you've also had the experience of being an executor. So now the gift you bring to your family and your clients is when you sit in front of them and you see them avoiding the conversation they should be having, because you've had that experience, you can say, hey, this probably isn't going to end well, right? And if we can be the conduit for those conversations, I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
I think that's where that saying, you'll understand when you're older because you've experienced it. Like now, like there's no avoiding conversations in my life now, because of the experience I had, from November 2022 to February, March of 2025, so that everything was settled.
Yeah. What were there any financial or logistical resources that you wish you had? Is it, conversation cards that have these challenging topics, or things that you use in your coaching world now, or a companion to help you make those phone calls to the accounts, or an AI sender of death certificates, so you don't have to attach it to every email or every print it out?
I mean, I think there's a lot of tools available.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I would have looked for them sooner.
Mm.
That's what I think. I thought I knew more than I knew.
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that. I'm blessed in the fact that because I have this work, doing this work, there's a lot. Kristen Heaney was a perfect example of someone I leaned heavily on the emotional side because of her experience with her parents.
Mm-hmm.
And every situation is so bloody unique. That's the other thing too, right? You really don't know. You just don't know. For me, it was more about dad. I wish dad would have had the courage to have been more transparent with his daughter, my sister. I
Mm-hmm.
think looking back, it would have alleviated a lot of the heartache that followed after he passed. And again, that in itself is a challenge. If a sibling is in that seat like I was, really encourage your parents to balance out that transparency factor. Transparency breeds trust,
Mm-hmm.
and it's bloody hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think in my case, because I was the messenger after the death of, oh well, no, it's over here in this account for these reasons. It's the messaging from me would have been very different coming from the guy who made the decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Vincent, what are you doing now to honor your dad's legacy? And um, I'll put the question mark there, and then I'll add something after.
Yeah. I mean, trying to be the best dad I can be to my boys.
I love
Right?
that.
I know that's maybe sounds a little cheesy, but I think it's true. Dad, a dad opened so many doors for me. You ultimately have to step through it, but I think what I'm doing to honor him, not only carrying his name, but be the best version I can be for my kids. And then I think too, he was very involved in our city, in the community. So I do a lot of that community focused work as well. The other big passion he had was soccer. So he's a founder of a bunch of soccer teams up here in Hamilton. That tradition continues with my boys. Um, I think just honoring the last name. You know, going back to his village has been. I brought the kids there a couple of years ago to see where Nonno came from. I think that's part of honoring it too.
Mm-hmm.
I actually sat down about a month ago with his best friend, my dad's best friend, who happens to be my godfather, and just sat with them for a couple hours and just talked. And it was nice for him just to have that connection back to my dad. But it was it was selfish. I just wanted to talk to him about stories and stuff.
Yeah.
I think to wrap that question up is continue to talk about him. So like I talk about my dad to my boys all the time. This is what Nonno Vince did. This is what
Mm-hmm.
he things he would say, places he took me, so that they, even though they met him, but they were very young, I
Yeah.
really want them to know that the story didn't start with me. There's somebody, and the story didn't start with dad. Unfortunately, I didn't get that back history of my dad. So with my boys, I really want to let them know the history of our family so that they can have that memory for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you're taking, some of the understanding of the upbringing that wasn't as readily shared with you, and giving that to your kids. I think, and the first thing you said of just being the best dad ever was amazing.
Yeah.
Additionally, ironically, yesterday I was on Kristen Heaney's Next Gen cohort call, and one of the people in one of my breakouts named their daughter after the matriarch of their family, and they were talking about how it was such an honor to be named after that person. And there's a little bit of, I have to fill these massive shoes that Vincenzo built for you. And so I think, and it sounds like you're able to go your own path, and I think it's really special.
Thank you. I mean, like my dad was that guy too. He did everything unconventionally.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. He marched to his own drum, and I actually see that with my youngest son now. He's wild, but I've always been like that too. We always kind of go against the norm.
Yes.
So to your point, at the time when dad, bringing it back to an earlier part of the conversation, when he sold the company, I was like devastated. Like, I'm like, what am I going to do? But now, like, being able to do what I want, when I want, and how I want it, I think that's what's made him the most happy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, go do you, right? So to your point, I've made my own Vince Valeri.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's what kind of keeps me going.
Amazing. One of the final questions here, Vince, I'm going to put you into
into a situation. So I want you to imagine that there's another 42-year-old who's just within a, multiple different people, complex family. And you just got a diagnosis that your dad, your best friend, has a terminal illness. What grief mantras and words of wisdom would you like to tell, that younger version of yourself, and would you like to leave our audience with?
It's a simple one, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Yeah.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. Are there any final lessons or thoughts you want to leave with our audience, and how can people find you?
Yeah, that last one hit me, Justin. People can find me on LinkedIn. So Vincent Valeri, LinkedIn. I'm all over there. My website as well too. Just type in Vincent Valeri. It'll redirect you to my website. That's where you can find me. In the show notes of Justin's podcast, The Currency of Grief.
Definitely. It'll be there. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that last one got you, because, just knowing and hearing for two people who have gone through it, through the thick of it, it's going to be okay. It's important.
Yeah. Thank you, man. It's been a powerful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vincent. I really appreciate your time and you being a guest on the Currency of Grief podcast. Family, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Currency of Grief. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day. Yeah. So go have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.